Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today we're continuing our discussion of how caffeine affects our sleep. Understanding how caffeine affects us is complex and deserves an in-depth conversation. So today we're discussing how caffeine affects our sleep quality and daytime functioning, and we'll also explain the coffee cycle. Hey everyone, my name is Matthew, and welcome to Calm Insomniac, where we're a community of people trying to get a better night's sleep. If you enjoy learning about sleep health, sleep tips, and relaxing classical music, then please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications. If you missed my last video, I discussed the basics of caffeine and how it affects us, and you can check that video out right over here. But in that video, I mostly presented caffeine in a negative light. But let's start today by presenting caffeine in a positive light and explain some of its benefits. Caffeine is a stimulant, and this property can be beneficial. As a stimulant, caffeine has been shown to enhance endurance and concentration. In fact, the athletic community has long been a supporter of caffeine because many athletes feel that they perform better with some caffeine in their system. The military is another huge supporter of caffeine use. The military was one of the first organizations to study the benefits of caffeine included in the nutrition of their elite forces. In fact, one study conducted by the United States Army found that caffeine included in diet was the #1 positive influence on a soldier's performance. Aside from physical performance, caffeine has also been shown to increase mental performance. Caffeine is often consumed to combat fatigue, and when we're tired, our mental capacities are less fine-tuned. But if we consume caffeine to combat this, our awareness, cognition, and decision-making skills all improve. And this is important because an alert mind makes better decisions, and this has been shown to reduce workplace injuries. This can be critically important for those who work overnight shifts or those who travel frequently and experience jet lag. These types of workers are at a higher risk for experiencing tiredness, and consuming caffeine can combat that and make their job performance better and safer. So the benefits of caffeine are well documented, and before we get to the negatives, let's compare sleep deprivation to caffeine deprivation. I've spoken about this in one of my previous videos, but it's recommended that the average adult sleep 7 to 9 hours a night. This amount of sleep promotes proper sleep health and overall body restoration. Sleep deprivation is when we sleep less than is recommended for our body. This is different than total sleep deprivation, which is going without sleep for more than 24 hours. Sleep deprivation has numerous negative side effects, including reduced mental capacity, irritability, reduced motor skills, and poorer judgment. These side effects can become severe, with extreme cases showing reduced moral behavior, reduced ethical behavior, and increased risk-taking. In fact, one study found that impulse crimes and lapses in judgment are more common in the evening, partly due to fatigue. What's interesting is that sleep deprivation and caffeine deprivation have very similar side effects. Caffeine deprivation can be considered a reduced version of caffeine withdrawal. Over time, caffeine users develop a tolerance, and this tolerance develops slowly, but as I mentioned in my previous video, most people don't realize just how much caffeine they consume in a day. If you regularly consume caffeine, each night when you sleep, you'll experience a period of caffeine deprivation or abstinence. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but depending on how high your tolerance or dependence on caffeine is, you could experience similar negative side effects to that of sleep deprivation. Negative side effects of caffeine deprivation include reduced emotional stability, such as irritability or the inability to properly perceive neutral emotions, as well as headaches, increased anxiety, and reduced motor skills. Now that we have that background information out of the way, let's continue discussing how caffeine affects our sleep quality. And I'm going to start with a brief summary of some of the points I mentioned in my previous video, which again you can check out right over here. Studies have shown that when we consume caffeine in close proximity to bedtime, this increases our sleep latency and decreases our total sleep time. This means it takes us longer to fall asleep, and the total amount of time asleep is lessened. Additionally, caffeine remains in our system for 3 to 7 hours or sometimes longer before it's completely eliminated. And finally, caffeine is a diuretic, meaning it helps release excess salt and water from our bodies through urination. But now let me mention something I hadn't talked about before, and that is caffeine actually reduces our body's production of melatonin. When we consume caffeine throughout the day, our overall melatonin production is reduced, and this has a lasting effect on us by the time we go to bed. And this is just another reason that caffeine reduces our potential for future quality sleep. When we wake up tired, we consume caffeine, and people who wake up tired have a higher chance of consuming even more caffeine. So, as you can see, this starts a cycle which we now need to address. Let me explain the coffee cycle, which I'm sure is something that a lot of you are in. Laboratory research has found that a sleep deprivation of as little as 90 minutes in one night can reduce daytime objective alertness by 1/3. We also know that most people who wake up tired will consume caffeine to help themselves wake up, and this will temporarily improve their daytime performance. But next, one of two scenarios will likely occur. Either you notice that your performance has improved and you enjoy the results, or you will notice the caffeine boost begin to diminish and you'll start to feel tired again. For a lot of people, either scenario means that they end up consuming additional caffeine. And as you consume caffeine throughout the day, this increases the chance that your sleep that night will be interrupted and diminished. So then there's a higher chance you wake up the next morning feeling tired, and then you consume caffeine to mitigate the tiredness, and as you can see, the cycle continues. This coffee cycle gets even worse as your tolerance and dependence on caffeine increase. Repeatedly going back and forth between periods of caffeine consumption and caffeine deprivation is difficult for your body to cope with. This is like experiencing a mini withdrawal from caffeine, and it's no wonder that a lot of people with a high tolerance for caffeine frequently wake up with headaches, or you hear someone say something to the effect of, "I'm useless before I've had my morning coffee." So if you find yourself in this coffee cycle and you're dependent on caffeine to the point where you can't function without it, how can you reduce your caffeine consumption? First, you could always try just quitting cold turkey. But be warned, quitting or significantly reducing your caffeine consumption could create severe withdrawal symptoms. You might experience massive headaches, you might get the shakes, and this is probably very unhealthy for most people. But if you think you can just stop altogether and do it instantaneously, then I guess give it a shot. A healthier approach would be to wean yourself off of caffeine slowly. If you regularly drink 4 cups of coffee a day, then try weaning yourself back to 3 cups of coffee a day. You might initially get headaches or experience other negative side effects from this reduction in caffeine, but your body will get used to this, and over time you can slowly reduce the amount of caffeine that you consume in a day. Finally, some research has suggested that you can actually mentally trick yourself into believing you've had caffeine. Some studies have found that when participants believe they receive caffeine but are actually receiving a placebo, their results are very similar to those who actually received caffeine. And other research has suggested that just believing you've had caffeine is enough to extend the benefits of actually consuming caffeine. Now, I don't exactly have a recommendation for how you could try this, but if you don't have a high dependence on caffeine, this might be something you could experiment with. Alright, that is even more information about how caffeine affects our sleep quality and an explanation of the coffee cycle. I think it's really important to understand just how caffeine affects us because so many people regularly use caffeine and it does have a big impact on our sleep health. Let me know in the comments below, are you in the coffee cycle and how does it affect you? I personally don't need coffee to wake up, so I don't really experience this, but if you're willing to share your experience, please do, because it would be very insightful for me and anyone else who wants to read it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Facebook and Pinterest, check out my website, and join my email list. All of those links are down below. If you missed my previous video where I discussed the basics of how caffeine affects sleep, then you've got to check out this video right over here. And if you want to learn more about sleep health, then definitely check out this playlist down over here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.